The church bells rang, but there was no joy in their sound. The melody that was meant to celebrate love instead echoed with quiet sorrow. The bride sat in her wheelchair near the altar, her trembling hands clutching a bouquet of faded lilies. Her name was Alara, and everyone in the room knew she didn't want this wedding. Not really. Her white dress shimmered under the golden light from the stained glass windows. But her eyes, once bright, full of laughter, were now dimmed by pain. The groom, Darren, stood a few steps away, handsome in a perfectly fitted suit, but his smile was hollow. He wasn't marrying Alara out of love. He was marrying her because of pity, and everyone knew it. Behind the murmurs of the crowd, whispers floated like ghosts. She used to be so beautiful before the accident. Poor thing. He's only doing this to look good. If I were her, I couldn't go through with it. Alara heard every word. Each whisper dug deeper into her chest until her breaths came in shallow, quiet tremors. Once, she'd been a dancer-light on her feet, full of dreams. Then, one rainy night, a car crash shattered everything. Her spine was injured. Her legs never worked again. Her fiancé left within weeks. Her friends faded away one by one. Now she was marrying Darren, her ex's older brother, because he'd promised to take care of her, but she didn't want to be taken care of. She wanted to be loved. When the priest spoke her name, her voice barely came out. Do. And in that fragile whisper, the room grew even quieter. Tears welled in her eyes. No one reached to wipe them away. Her mother looked away. The groom's friends stared at the floor. Even the priest hesitated before saying, "You may kiss the bride." Darren didn't. He just leaned down, kissed her forehead lightly, and smiled for the cameras. The applause that followed was empty, and somewhere in the back of the church, near the doorway, a man holding the hand of a little girl stopped in his tracks. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had only come to pick up some flowers for his late wife's grave. But when his daughter pointed and said, "Daddy, that lady's crying," he turned and his heart sank. He recognized that face, Elara. He hadn't seen her since the accident. Back then, he'd been the paramedic who found her in the wreck. The woman who had begged him, through blood and rain, "Please, don't let me die." And now, years later, here she was alive, but broken in another way. His name was Caleb, a single dad who'd lost his wife to illness 3 years ago. He knew pain. He knew loneliness. But the look on Elara's face at that altar, it was something deeper than pain. It was surrender. He couldn't move. He just watched as everyone clapped, pretending to celebrate what clearly wasn't love. And then, for a brief moment, Elara's eyes lifted. They met his. It was only a second, but something in her gaze changed. For the first time that day, she didn't look like a victim. She looked awake. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering petals down the church steps. Guests chatted, took pictures, and smiled like everything was perfect. Elara sat quietly in her wheelchair, staring at the horizon. The groom talked to reporters, his voice loud, rehearsed. "We're just happy to finally tie the knot. Love conquers all," he said, smiling for the cameras. Love. The word made her chest ache. Caleb stood a few steps away, his daughter hiding shyly behind his leg. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't. Something told him this woman didn't belong here. When the crowd began to thin, he finally stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said softly. Elara turned, startled. Then her lips parted slightly. "You," she whispered. You're the one who, he nodded. From the accident, yes. You probably don't remember much. She blinked fast, tears welling again. I remember your voice. He smiled sadly. You told me not to let you die. I didn't. A silence passed between them, heavy but gentle. Then Ilara's gaze dropped to her bouquet. Maybe you shouldn't have. Caleb crouched down so his eyes were level with hers. Don't say that, he murmured. You're still here for a reason. She laughed bitterly. To be pitied. To be paraded around in a dress I can't even walk in. Caleb didn't answer. He just looked at her for a long time, really looked. Her trembling hands, her pale skin, the courage it took just to sit there under the weight of 1,000 stares. Finally, he said, Then let me ask you something. What? Do you want to stay? Her heart stuttered. What? Here, he said, glancing toward the church. Do you want this? Her lips quivered. I don't know. Caleb extended his hand. Then let's find out. And before anyone could stop them, before the groom could even notice, the single dad took her hand. The crowd gasped. Cameras turned. The whispers began again. But Ilara didn't hear any of it. For the first time in years, she felt alive, and as Caleb wheeled her away from that empty celebration, the petals on the steps swirled behind them like soft white snow. The sound of the church faded behind them. All that remained was the quiet rustle of wind through the trees and the uneven rhythm of Ilara's breathing. Caleb pushed her wheelchair slowly down the stone path that led to the parking lot. The sky was overcast, and the air smelled faintly of rain. His daughter, Lily, skipped beside them, clutching her small teddy bear. Unaware of the scandal they'd just caused, Ilara finally spoke, her voice trembling. You shouldn't have done that. Caleb looked down at her. Done what? Taken my hand, in front of everyone. He smiled faintly. It looked like you needed someone too. She let out a bitter laugh. Now they'll say the crippled bride ran off with a stranger. They can say what they want, he replied. People always do. He opened the car door and gently helped her in. His movements were careful, deliberate, the way someone moves. When they've lost something once and don't want to lose again, when he finished adjusting her seatbelt. Ilara's fingers brushed his wrist by accident. For a brief second, the world seemed to pause. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. He closed the door and leaned against the car. Because nobody else did. Ilara stared out the window. Her reflection looked like someone else, pale, hollow-eyed, a ghost wearing a wedding dress. Where will you go? Caleb asked. She gave a dry smile. Does it matter? My husband's probably telling the press I'm unwell. My mother's embarrassed. I have nowhere. Caleb thought for a long moment, then said softly, You can come with us. Ilara turned sharply. With you. Just for the night, he said, until you figure out what you want to do. I live a few miles away. Small place, quiet. You'll be safe there. She hesitated. The offer was kind, almost too kind. But she was tired of pretending, tired of being seen as broken. Finally, she nodded. Just for the night. The drive was silent. The wipers beat a slow rhythm against the glass as drizzle turned to rain. Lily hummed softly in the back seat, tracing raindrops down the window. Caleb glanced at Ilara every now and then. Her dress was slightly torn where the wheelchair's wheel had caught the fabric. Her veil was gone, left somewhere on the church steps. But her eyes, even filled with sorrow, held something fierce. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. "Miss what?" "Dancing." Ilara's lips parted. She hadn't heard that word spoken aloud in years. Every day, she whispered, "It used to feel like flying. Now it just feels like falling." Caleb's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Maybe one day you'll fly again, just in a different way." She looked at him then, really looked. The way his hands moved, strong, steady. The way his eyes softened every time his daughter spoke. "You talk like someone who's lost something too," she said. He nodded. "My wife, 3 years ago. Cancer, I'm sorry," she said softly. He shrugged gently. "It taught me something, that sometimes life doesn't take people away to punish us. It just makes room for something else." Ilara didn't answer, but a tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't bother to hide it when they arrived. Caleb's small wooden house sat on the edge of a quiet road. The porch light glowed warm against the misty evening. Lily ran ahead, barefoot on the wet grass. "Daddy, can I show her the stars from my room?" "Maybe later, sweetheart," Caleb said. Opening the door, the inside was cozy, soft, yellow light, the smell of pine and old books. A framed photo of Caleb and his wife sat on the mantel. Her smile was gentle, the kind that still lingered in the room somehow. ELARA, single quotes, as throat tightened. "She's beautiful." "She was," Caleb said quietly. "She'd have liked you." He wheeled her to the couch, covered her with a blanket, and placed a mug of tea in her hands. The warmth seeped into her cold fingers, and for the first time in years, she felt safe, but the moment was fragile. Because comfort was dangerous, it made her want to stay, and staying meant feeling. Later that night, she woke to the sound of soft laughter. From down the hall, she could see Caleb helping Lily with her pajamas, tucking her in, kissing her forehead. Ilara watched silently. The way he held his daughter, gentle, protective, made her chest ache with something she couldn't name. When he noticed her watching, he smiled. "Couldn't sleep." She shook her head. "I forgot what it looks like. A home." He leaned against the doorway. "It's nothing fancy. Just a place we try to make a little less lonely." Ilara hesitated. "Do you ever stop missing her?" His eyes softened. "No, but missing her doesn't hurt the same way it used to. Now it just reminds me that I loved her right." She nodded slowly. "I wish someone loved me like that." Caleb's voice was quiet. "Maybe they still can." For a heartbeat, the world went still. The clock ticked faintly in the background. The rain whispered against the windows. Then Lily's voice broke the silence. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily, "is the pretty lady gonna stay?" Caleb smiled gently. For a little while, Ilara looked down, hiding her trembling hands in the blanket. "Just for a little while," she whispered. But deep down, she wasn't sure she meant it. Because something about this house, about the man who refused to walk away, made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Morning crept softly into the small wooden house. The light filtered through pale curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and quiet. Ilara stirred awake on the couch, her fingers brushing against the warm fabric of the blanket Caleb had tucked around her the night before. For a few disoriented seconds, she forgot where she was. No cameras, no whispers, no pitying stares, just the faint smell of coffee and laughter from the kitchen. When she turned, she saw Caleb at the stove, wearing an old grey t-shirt, flipping pancakes while Lily danced beside him with a wooden spoon in hand. The sight was simple, ordinary and heartbreakingly beautiful. "Good morning," Caleb said, noticing her awake. "I hope you like pancakes. They're Lily's specialty." Lily giggled proudly. "I made them all by myself. Daddy just did the hard parts." Elara smiled softly. "Then I'm honored to try your creation." Caleb carried a plate over and placed it on the small table beside her wheelchair. "There you go. No fancy presentation, but they're warm." She picked up the fork slowly. Her hands still trembled, sometimes a reminder of how fragile her body had become. But she took a bite, and for the first time in years, food actually tasted like something good. Lily asked eagerly. "Better than good," Elara said with a small smile. "They taste like Sunday mornings." Caleb chuckled quietly. "That's exactly what we were going for." The laughter that followed was soft, easy, and unfamiliar to her. It had been so long since she'd felt anything close to normal after breakfast. Caleb fixed a small ramp outside so she could roll onto the porch. The air was fresh after the night's rain, and sunlight sparkled on the wet grass. Lily played nearby with her teddy bear, while Caleb sat on the porch steps, sipping coffee. Elara watched him for a long time. The way he sat grounded, calm, as if life hadn't broken him, even though it had tried. "You're good with her," she said quietly. He smiled. "She saved me. After my wife passed, I didn't want to get out of bed. Then one morning, Lily walked in wearing her mum's scarf and said, 'Daddy, she told me to make sure you eat.'" He looked down, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That was the moment I decided to keep living. For her." Elara's eyes softened. "She's lucky to have you." Caleb turned his gaze to her. "Maybe I'm the lucky one." Their eyes held for a second too long, long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. She looked away first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't deserve kindness like this." Caleb frowned. "Why do you say that?" "I was supposed to have a life," she murmured. "Dancing, teaching, maybe a family one day. Then the accident happened, and everyone looked at me like I was a burden. Even my own fiancé. I learned to stop expecting anything." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "And what if you deserve more than what they gave you?" Her throat tightened. "Hope hurts." "I know," he said softly, "but sometimes it hurts because it's waking something that's been asleep too long." That afternoon, while Caleb went to work on the garden, Lily insisted on showing Elara her room. The small space was filled with drawings, fairy lights, and a few old photos taped to the wall. Her parents smiling, holding her when she was a baby. "Do you miss your mum?" Elara asked gently. Lily nodded. "Sometimes. But Daddy says she's part of everything now. Even the stars." Elara smiled sadly. "He sounds like a good man." "He is," Lily said proudly. Then, lowering her voice, she added, "He doesn't laugh much though. But when you came, he did." Elara froze. "He did." "Unhung," Lily grinned. "You make him smile, like my mummy used to." Those innocent words cut deeper than Elara expected, because she'd seen that smile too, quiet, hesitant, but real, and for the first time since her accident, she felt something dangerous stirring in her chest, something she'd promised herself she'd never feel again. That evening, Caleb returned from outside, dirt on his hands, sun catching in his hair. He found Elara still on the porch, sketching something in a small notebook. He tilted his head. "What's that?" "Just a habit," she said shyly. I can't dance anymore, so I draw what I used to feel. Movements, emotions, music in motion. He sat beside her, peering over her shoulder. The drawing showed a woman in a flowing dress, spinning mid-air, surrounded by falling petals. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "She looks free." Alara smiled faintly. "That's how I used to feel." He looked at her, really looked, and said quietly, "You still could." Her breath hitched. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing you." Caleb's voice softened. "Then believe me. You're not broken, Alara. You just survived something most people couldn't." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't know what it's like to wake up every day and see your own body as a cage." Caleb reached out and gently took her hand. "Then let someone hold the key with you." She froze, staring at their joined hands. The warmth of his touch felt like a pulse coming back to life inside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world seemed to slow. The fading sunlight, the rustling leaves, the distant laughter of a child. Then Alara whispered, "You make me forget I'm supposed to be miserable." Caleb smiled faintly. "Good, maybe that's the first step." That night, after dinner, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Lily had fallen asleep, curled between them, her teddy bear tucked under her chin. Caleb adjusted the blanket over her and looked at Alara. The firelight danced in her eyes, turning them amber and alive. "Can I tell you something?" she said suddenly. "Of course, when you took my hand in that church," she began, voice trembling, "I thought you were just saving me from embarrassment. But when you looked at me, it felt like you saw the person I was before everything. No one's done that in a long time." He met her gaze quietly. "I didn't see the person you were, Alara. I saw the one you still are." Her heart caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to tell him he was wrong, but she couldn't, because for once, she didn't want to ruin the feeling. They sat there in silence, two broken souls who had forgotten how to hope, slowly, learning what it felt like to begin again. And as the firelight flickered across their faces, it was clear to anyone watching, sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't pain. It's the quiet possibility of happiness finding its way back. The next morning arrived quiet and soft, the kind of morning that felt like a secret. Sunlight spilled gently across the floorboards, catching the steam from Caleb's coffee mug. Alara was already awake, sitting by the window. She had spent most of the night thinking about the church, about Darren, about the way Caleb's words had lingered long after he left. The room. Lily was outside chasing butterflies in the tall grass. Her laughter carried through the open window like music. Caleb leaned against the doorway. "You didn't sleep much." Alara smiled faintly. "You can tell." "Only because I didn't either." She looked down at her hands. "Do you ever feel like the world expects you to stay broken forever?" He nodded slowly. "People like to define others by the worst thing that happened to them, but you don't have to let them." Her gaze lifted to meet his. "You make it sound so easy." He smiled sadly. "It's not, but it's possible." There was something in the air between them, something tender, dangerous, and unspoken. But before either of them could say more, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the stillness. Alara froze. A black car pulled up outside the gate. The door opened, and out stepped Darren, the man she was supposed to have married. He looked furious. His suit was still pressed, his hair immaculate, but his face was red with anger and humiliation. Ilara, he shouted, slamming the door. What the hell is this? Caleb moved instinctively, stepping forward. She doesn't have to talk to you. Darren's eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? Someone who actually cares, Caleb said evenly. Darren let out a dry laugh. You think you're some kind of hero? You embarrassed me in front of the entire town. Ilara's voice trembled. You embarrassed yourself, Darren. You stood there, smiling for cameras, while I cried. He glared at her. You're my wife, Ilara. No, she said firmly, surprising even herself. I'm not. I never said I do to a man who saw me as a charity case. Darren took a threatening step forward, but Caleb didn't move. He stood between them, calm but unyielding. Leave, Caleb said. You don't belong here. Darren's jaw clenched. You think this ends here? She's mine, and I'll make sure the world knows she ran off with some widower out of pity. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. Don't you dare twist this. But Darren was already turning away, his voice sharp with venom. You'll regret this, Ilara. Both of you will. He climbed back into the car, slammed the door, and sped away, leaving a trail of dust behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Caleb exhaled slowly, trying to calm the pulse pounding in his neck. Are you okay? Ilara nodded weakly, though her hands trembled. He'll ruin me, she whispered. He has connections, money, everything. I have nothing. Caleb crouched in front of her. You have you, and you have us. Her lip quivered. Why are you doing this for me? He looked at her for a long moment. Because someone once did it for me when I didn't think I was worth saving. Her chest tightened. Your wife. He nodded. When I came home from the hospital after she died, I couldn't look at Lily without breaking down. One night, Lily found an old note her mum had left, just 3 words. Keep choosing life. I didn't understand it then, but now I think I do. He reached out and gently touched her hand. Maybe this is me choosing life again, and maybe it's you too. That evening, Ilara sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed into shades of amber and pink. She could still hear Darren's words echoing in her head, but underneath them, quieter and stronger, was Caleb's voice. You have us. Lily came out, holding a small flower crown she had made. Can I put it on you? Ilara smiled softly. Of course. Lily placed it gently on her head and giggled. Now you look like a princess. Ilara's throat tightened. It's been a long time since anyone called me that. Caleb stepped outside just then, wiping his hands on a rag. He froze when he saw her. For a moment, he didn't speak, just watched her in the fading light. A crown of wildflowers in her hair, the faintest smile on her face. You look. He stopped, searching for words. Happy. Ilara looked down shyly. Maybe I am. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Not fear, not sadness. Something lighter. But hope, she realized, is a fragile thing. And the world has a way of testing it. That night, as Caleb locked the doors, he found Ilara staring at her phone. What's wrong? He asked. She turned, the screen toward him. It was a news article, her wedding photo plastered across the headline. Runaway bride leaves groom at the altar. Seen with local single father. Caleb's stomach dropped. They're already talking about it. Her eyes shimmered with tears. He's destroying me, Caleb. Everyone will think I ran away with you out of pity. They'll make me a joke. Caleb knelt beside her. Let them talk. People will always find something to say. But you know what's true. Her voice broke. Do I? Because right now, I don't even know who I am anymore. He took her hand and placed it over his chest. Then start here. You're the woman who deserves more than pity. You're the one who smiled today for the first time in years. That's who you are. Her tears fell freely now. You make me want to believe that. Then believe it, he said softly. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and rain began to fall again. The same rain that had once taken everything from her. But this time, she wasn't alone. Caleb sat beside her in silence, his hand still over hers. The storm raging outside as if trying to test their strength, and as the thunder rumbled over the small wooden house, Elara realized something she hadn't dared to before. Maybe storms don't come to destroy. Maybe they come to wash away what was never meant to stay. The rain poured harder that night than it had in months. Thunder rolled through the hills like a heartbeat, and flashes of lightning turned the quiet countryside into bursts of silver and shadow. Inside Caleb's small house, the lights flickered. Lily slept soundly in her room, her teddy bear clutched close. Elara sat by the window, watching the storm rage beyond the glass. Each drop of rain against the window felt like a memory she couldn't escape the car crash. The headlights, the scream, the sound of twisting metal, and through it all, that same helplessness, that same feeling of being trapped, watching the world move while she stayed still. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. Caleb walked in quietly, 2 mugs of hot cocoa in his hands. You okay? She forced a smile. Storms always make me nervous. I used to love rain. Before, he handed her a mug and sat beside her. Funny, I used to hate it. But after the accident that night, the one where I met you, it started meaning something else. She turned to him, puzzled. What do you mean? It reminded me that sometimes the worst nights bring people you were meant to find. Her fingers tightened around the mug. You really believe that? I have to, he said softly. Otherwise, all the pain wouldn't mean anything. For a long moment, they sat there in silence to people who had been broken by different storms, both finding shelter in the same one. Lightning flashed, and the power suddenly went out. The house fell into darkness. Elara gasped softly. Caleb, I'm here. He lit a candle on the table, its warm glow dancing across their faces. It's just the fuse. I'll check it in a bit. But he didn't move right away. He just sat there, watching her face illuminated by the small flame, fragile, but strong in ways she couldn't see. You know, he said quietly, you've changed the whole house. She blinked. What do you mean? Before you came, it was just walls and silence. Now it feels alive again. Her breath caught. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because they make me wish for things I can't have. He leaned forward, his voice gentle but certain. Who told you you can't have them? Tears shimmered in her eyes. You don't understand. I'm not the same person. I can't dance. I can't walk. I can't even leave this house without help. My body is broken, Caleb. He reached out slowly and took her hand. Your body isn't what makes you whole. Her lip trembled. Then what does? He smiled faintly. Your heart. And that's still beating just fine. The candle flickered as the wind howled outside. Elara looked down at their hands, His large, steady, warm fingers wrapped around hers, and for a brief, dizzying moment, the world felt quiet again. She whispered, "I don't know what you're doing to me." Caleb's voice was low. "Maybe I'm just reminding you that you're still alive." The words hung in the air, soft as thunder. Then, suddenly, the house shook with a sharp crash, a tree branch snapping under the weight of the storm. Caleb stood immediately. "Stay here," he said, rushing toward the door. But Alara couldn't stay still. Something in her chest twisted painfully as she watched him step outside into the rain. She wheeled closer to the door, heart pounding. Through the glass, she could see him fighting against the wind, trying to pull the heavy branch away from the fence. The rain drenched him completely, his shirt clinging to his frame, his movements quick and determined. Then another flash of lightning, and for an instant she saw it. The same man who had pulled her from the wreck years ago, his face illuminated by chaos. Saving her again. Moments later, he came back in, soaked and breathless. "You're drenched," she said, panic and relief mixing in her voice. He laughed softly, shaking his hair like a wet dog. "Fence is clear. We'll survive the night." Without thinking, she reached for a towel and pressed it against his face. Her hands trembled as she wiped the rain from his cheeks. Their eyes met, too close, too tender. "Caleb," she whispered. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, neither of them pretended not to feel it. The storm raged louder outside, but inside, the world felt utterly still. Then Lily's voice echoed sleepily from the hallway. "Daddy, is everything okay?" Caleb stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. "Yeah, sweetheart. Go back to bed." Alara exhaled shakily. The spell broke. Caleb turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry that you don't have to apologize," she interrupted softly. He looked back at her, searching her face for something he couldn't name. "I just don't want you to think I'm doing all this out of pity." "I don't," she said quietly. "Pity doesn't feel like this." Later, when the storm began to fade, Ilara found herself unable to sleep. She rolled quietly to the window again and watched the rain slow into a drizzle. The candle had burned low, but its small light still danced in the shadows. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid of storms anymore. Because this one hadn't come to take, it had come to remind her she was still capable of feeling everything she thought she'd lost in the early hours of morning. Caleb walked into the living room. He stopped when he saw her still awake, lost in thought. "You okay?" She turned toward him, eyes tired but warm. "Yeah, I think I finally am." He smiled faintly. "Good." She hesitated, then asked, "Caleb, why did you really come back for me that day in the church?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because when I saw you sitting there, alone, crying, it felt like I was watching myself from 3 years ago. And I remembered how much it hurt to be unseen. I couldn't walk away from that again." Ilara's voice trembled. "So you saved me?" He shook his head gently. "No, Ilara, you're saving yourself. I'm just here to remind you it's okay to live again." Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness this time, but from something softer, something that felt like peace. The storm outside was over, but inside that little house, something new had just begun. Morning came quietly, the kind of golden dawn that paints everything in soft light, as if the world itself is trying to make amends for the night before. The storm had left behind puddles, damp earth, and the faint scent of rain in the air. Birds began to sing, cautiously at first, as if testing the silence. Alara awoke to the gentle sound of Lily's laughter from the kitchen. For a moment, she just lay there, listening. The small, innocent giggles mixed with Caleb's voice, calm, steady, comforting. It felt like a song she had once known, but forgotten long ago. She wheeled herself slowly toward the kitchen doorway. Caleb was standing by the counter, his sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes. Lily sat at the table, still in her pajamas, holding a fork much too big for her little hand. "Morning, sleepyhead," Lily chirped. "Daddy made pancakes, but I helped mix them." Caleb smiled over his shoulder. "She mostly made a mess, but a cute one." Alara couldn't help but laugh softly. "You two are dangerous together." "Sit down," Caleb said gently. "You need breakfast." "I can help," she began. He shook his head. "You've done enough helping for one lifetime. Let us take care of you for once." She wheeled closer, watching the steam rise from the plate he set before her. Simple pancakes, butter melting slowly, warm syrup dripping like sunlight. For a woman who had spent years being served out of obligation, this small act done with kindness felt like healing. After breakfast, Lily ran outside to chase puddles, her tiny boots splashing with joy. Alara watched from the window, her reflection mixing with the child's laughter. "She's beautiful," she murmured. Caleb, standing beside her, nodded softly. "She is. Her mum used to say she laughs like sunlight." She passed away when Lily was just a baby. Alara looked at him, eyes full of quiet sympathy. "I'm sorry." He smiled faintly, not from pain, but from peace. "It's okay. I think she'd like you." "Why's that?" "Because you remind me of her," he said. "Not because of how you look, but because you keep going, even when life tries to stop you." The words hit her deeper than she expected. "I haven't been going, Caleb," she whispered. "I've just been surviving." He turned toward her, voice soft but firm. "Then maybe it's time to start living." Later that afternoon, Caleb took Lily to visit a neighbor. Alara sat by herself in the living room, staring at her reflection in the dark TV screen. She looked different, not because her legs still didn't move, but because her eyes weren't hollow anymore. There was something new there, something alive. Her gaze drifted to the crutches standing near the door, the same ones the doctors had given her months ago, telling her to try, to push, to believe that maybe one day she could move again. She had ignored them all this time, too afraid of failure, too afraid of hope. But today, she wanted to try. She placed her hands on the wheelchair's arms and took a deep breath. Her heart pounded. Every muscle in her body trembled with both fear and longing. Just once, she whispered to herself. "Let me stand just once." She grabbed the nearest crutch, braced it, and pushed. Her arms shook. Her legs felt heavy, distant, like memories that weren't hers anymore. But she didn't stop. Sweat gathered on her forehead, tears on her lashes, and then, for the first time in years, she rose just a few inches, just enough to feel the weight of the earth beneath her again. Her breath hitched. Her hands trembled violently, but she was up. She was standing. For a brief, glorious second, she wasn't a paralyzed bride anymore. She wasn't the woman everyone pitied. She was simply Alara, alive, trembling, fighting. The door creaked open. Caleb froze in the doorway, Lily holding his hand. His eyes widened as he saw her halfway standing, gripping the crutches, tears streaming down her face. "Elara," he whispered, stunned. "You're standing," she finished softly, a broken smile spreading across her lips. "I just needed to believe I could." Lily gasped, running toward her. "You're standing. Daddy, look. She's standing." Caleb rushed to her side, steadying her gently, his hand on her shoulder. "I didn't want to fall," she said, voice shaking. "Then lean on me," he whispered back. "You don't have to do it alone." Her head dropped against his chest, sobbing quietly, not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of it all. Lily clapped her hands, eyes sparkling. "You did it. You're like a superhero." Caleb laughed through the tears in his own eyes. "Yeah, she really is." That evening, they went to the little chapel at the end of town, the same one where she had once been left crying, alone. The pews were empty, sunlight spilling through the windows like gold dust. Elara stood again, this time steadier, one crutch in hand, Caleb beside her. "Why here?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Because you deserve to rewrite your story where it broke." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked around. "I used to think this place was cursed." "It's not," he said gently. "It was just waiting for the right ending." She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "And what is that ending?" He took her hand, the same hand he had held that night before everyone, and said, "That you're not alone anymore." Outside, the bells of the church began to ring softly. Elara looked out through the open doors, the sunlight warm against her skin. In that moment, she didn't see her past, she saw her future, and for the first time since the accident, she smiled without hesitation. Caleb wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Lily ran ahead, spinning in the courtyard, her laughter echoing through the air. Elara whispered, "Thank you, Caleb, for giving me back my life." He shook his head gently. "No, Elara. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already were." As the last light of evening faded, they stood there together, a small, imperfect family, born not from blood, but from kindness, loss, and second chances. The poor paralyzed bride who once cried alone was no longer waiting for someone to save her, because someone already had, not by lifting her off the ground, but by standing beside her until she could stand on her own. And in that quiet, golden hour, her story finally began again.